For us, one of the things we find dynamic about our business and why we're passionate about keeping it private is that our customer predominantly is a small contractor. He's a gardener, maybe 2 or 3 crews. His revenue might at most be $2.5 million. He needs a lot of help. We continue to sort of build this family brand inside our company to hopefully take care of these small operators.
Hi, I'm Benj, founder CEO at Proton AI, the AI-powered CRM built specifically for distributors. And you're listening to In the Mind of a Distributor, where we interview the smartest minds in distribution. Let's get into it. Jack, Doug, really excited to have you guys on the podcast today. So for context, Jack and Doug work together at Ewing, which is, I think, the largest family-owned distributor in the landscaping space. So really excited to have you guys on today to talk all things family business and a little bit about the landscaping distribution business too. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be with you guys.
Awesome. Glad to be here.
Cool. Well, getting started, would love to hear, starting with you, Doug, how you first got involved in the family business, and then Jack, your journey getting into the family business after that.
So I was in high school, so 1978, 79, a while ago. I realized at that point that if I came back in the family business, I would get a little bit of a head start on life. Now, our company was significantly smaller than it is today, but I knew after college at some point I would eventually end up back in the family business.
How many employees were in the family business when you joined?
So our business got started in 1922. My parents showed up in 1962, and my brothers and I showed up somewhere between 4th and 7th grade. I remember my first full-time job in the summer was $2.50 an hour, but that was back, I think, when I was a junior in high school. But when I came to the business full-time in 1985, we had 12 locations and we probably had 35 employees, closer to 50, I would guess. Yeah.
Yep. And today you guys have what, 250 locations?
Yeah, a little more than 250 locations, roughly 1,500 employees. At that time, we were just doing business from Fresno to San Francisco to Sacramento back in 1985. Well, actually, no, we had just opened up Arizona. So we had 12 locations and now we do business in 36 states.
Cool.
The number I think is like 268 or something like that right now. So we're keeps climbing every year.
Yep. Significantly bigger than 12.
Yes.
Okay. So you thought it'd be a way to get ahead. You joined the family business, you and your brother. What was sort of the initial journey of getting involved in the business?
Initial journey was kind of do everything it took. So I started out at college, run branches in the summer. We'd lay off a branch manager because he wasn't doing a good job. I'd come back in college. I'd turn the branch around, get the operational structure in place, and then I go back to college. But after college, I did sales, and then eventually I moved to Arizona to run the one facility we had in Phoenix. And so it's kind of how the business ended up in Phoenix. I moved here in 1987.
And Jack, you worked outside the business first. Was that intentional? What pulled you back in?
Yeah. After college, it was always my intention to join back in Ewing. And I remember growing up as a kid, I'd see my dad cutting checks at the counter in our kitchen and working on architectural drawings, working on stores. So I always knew I wanted to join back in the family business. After school, I worked in investment banking in New York City for a few years doing mergers and acquisitions, investment banking. So I knew I always wanted to be back in the business. And the way we structure in terms of family members joining the business, we require family members to work outside the company for a few years before joining back into the company, obviously for good work experience, but also I like to call it go somewhere where the name on the back of your jersey doesn't mean anything.
How did you guys think about the qualifications for coming back into the business? I mean, Jack, you obviously had this amazing career doing investment banking and were really qualified. That's a real problem for a lot of family businesses is some members of the next generation are exceptionally qualified and the business would be lucky to have them. And then others, maybe not so much. How did you think about setting out those ground rules and making it feel fair to everybody, even if they weren't going to be included?
It's still very early on. I mean, luckily there's only 4 members in my generation in the family business. So my 2 young cousins that just graduated college, they're going out in the work world. They're super smart and they've done well in college. And we're excited to see what they do in the early workforce. And then in a few years, if they want to come back in the family business, that would be awesome. In terms of like qualifications, realistically, qualification just, you had to get a 4-year degree and go work somewhere else. And there wasn't anything like regarding, okay, if you worked here or if you got an MBA, we kept it pretty flexible in that regard. The expectation is you, as a family member, you need to get outside work experience. And that's important for you as an individual, but also important for the business.
The other key thing is that as a business owner, you're in love with the game of business and the employees and want your kids or your nephews or nieces to have the same kind of passion, but that isn't always the case. The parent that raises those kids are totally different than you are, right? And so then all of a sudden, there's this expectation from other shareholders that, well, you have a great life, therefore my children will have a great life. And it's like, that's not always the case. There's a lot of burden in ownership in next generations that I don't think business owners always take into account. And so you have to be able to think about the asset first, the business, and what's important for the business. Because if business goes away or is transacted, or you can always sell it, and then that would be a way to solve your problem and make everything easy in theory. But now all of a sudden, now you've got a money issue you got to deal with. So for us, one of the things we find dynamic about our business and why we're passionate about keeping it private is that our customer predominantly is a small contractor. He's a gardener, maybe 2 or 3 crews. His revenue might at most be $2.5 million. He needs a lot of help. We have a lot of facilities. We continue to build this family brand inside our company to hopefully take care of these small operators. And so from our standpoint, we find that exciting as a family. And so the quote lifestyle that benefits from growing a successful family business isn't as important as it is to keep that culture going and keep the eye on the ball, which is that these small customers think that we're a resource for them to do work with. And not all family members can articulate that vision or feel that, you know?
I mean, what you just described is really what an amazing entrepreneur describes about their business. How do you make sure that people feel that way about the business as family members?
So the reminder is, you know, if the kid grew up at the country club, as most of the 4th generation kids do, you have to remind them what your core business is. And so if they can't embrace that as the reason why they were successful, then historically, maybe they're not qualified to work in the business. And therefore, they can still benefit as an owner, but I don't think they can benefit as an operator. And so I think those are 2 different classes of what I would call generational hierarchy that you as a family owner has to sort out. Because for me, operators should be rewarded above and beyond owners. Operators are paid basically market salaries. Maybe owners are compensated around dividends or some sort of compensation around profitability. But you also don't want to make sure that you have siblings sitting around waiting for the check and building their life. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's a tough balance.
Jack, I'm curious from your perspective, now that you're in the business and you have this amazing appreciation for the customer, what were the things that you learned growing up that helped foster that?
I have an appreciation for the customer, but I have a bigger and bigger appreciation for our people. I like to always talk about people first, customers will follow. My sister and I talk about impact of what if we grew this company to be at 15 employees, what it would look like at 3,000 employees. You can always put dollars and cents and numbers around profitability, but the people that we have working for us is what really drives and inspires my sister and I in terms of what we want to do to sustain the business. Growing up, my mom is a huge believer in the family of workers. We worked in the branches in the summers and got a taste of the business, stocking shelves, doing deliveries, working the counter. I would go to football practices in the morning, and then I would go work the store. That base of growing up in the business made me really appreciate not only our customers, but our people as well. I think that's the biggest thing that Allie and I talk about in terms of our generation is what kind of impact can we have on the 1,500 employees at Ewing. The people first, customers will follow, and the profitability and sales will follow after that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Most sales reps spend 72% of their week on admin tasks instead of actually selling. Proton changes that. We're a CRM built for distributors that guides your reps on who to call and what to sell. Our AI assistant Pronto even gives instant answers to questions like, what do I need to know about this account? Or which product should I pitch them next? Swish nearly tripled their growth rate by using Proton. You could too. Start by visiting proton.ai to learn more. Now back to the show.
I'm curious about you guys working together in the business. Have there been moments where you've disagreed? I feel like you probably have slightly different views on the business, slightly different strengths and weaknesses. I'm curious, like, how that's been working together.
Probably our biggest differentiator, Jack's a Wharton grad and a Wall Street grad, investment banking grad. I don't have near the business financial chops that my son does. So my sense of cash flow, EBITDA, and performance is more centered around store sales and the seasonality of our market. So when cash is going to be good and when cash is going to be bad. Jack's very, very literal. And then what's happened in today's world, we grew up on our own system starting back in 1987. And we had our stores network in 1989, way before the internet. And so our green screen IBM solution lasted us. We went live with a new ERP in 2020, believe it or not. We were on an Epicor system, Prof 21. But we really hadn't changed. So the Microsoft deck, all that stuff came very new to some of our workforce, especially this guy. And so the way the world communicates today and the speed in which you guys make decisions and the velocity in which you guys consume information is way beyond my comprehension. And I try hard to keep up. I do a halfway decent job. I'm not near as effective. We never used Excel back in the day, so I'm not an Excel whiz. Some of that stuff that I think is super important in today's business. Those are kind of the antes to the game. And back to your siblings and shareholders and operators, everybody's got to be somewhat technology savvy in distribution because the data, the analytics, everything is ending up in a technology deck that everybody expects you to be able to understand and use. And so that's going to change the landscape as far as leaders and companies going forward. But to me, my biggest difference is that Jack's much more specific on performance than I was.
It's a generational difference, I think, between my dad and I, but I got to give kudos to him. He's gotten a lot better over the last couple of years. He's using our data visualization tools. He's able to pull up on his phone what sales were every day, and he's getting a lot better at it. But, he prints out a lot more stuff at his desk. He prints out emails. He prints out the questions. He's doing all this. There's a lot more physical copies of stuff than me. But he's coming along. He's coming along in this kind of 21st century. In terms of where I see the business going is very similar to what my dad was talking about in terms of technology and data. And again, that also flows into what you guys are doing at Proton. I mean, the amount of data you can pull immediately and the way your systems are all connected, and then what you use with the data and then artificial intelligence you need with the data. That's where we will continue to push the business, is to be a really data savvy, data analytics heavy business, because that's the only way you can compete in this day and age.
Makes a ton of sense. And I feel like that's a pretty classic tension. I actually feel similar with my dad. The thing that I'm trying to figure out with you guys is Doug had so much more experience in the business and so much more intuition about the business, and you are just all over the data. How do you decide who's right when there's a disagreement? Or does that cause tension? Because I would imagine there's sometimes when you're oh, we need to pay attention to this piece of data, and Doug is dude, slow down. This doesn't really matter.
I wouldn't say, dude, slow down. I go, dude, it's going to be different in 90 days. Settle down.
Yeah.
That's kind of my response. But the thing that's interesting, Jack talked briefly about the technology. We compete with now 4 large publicly traded competitors, and they're so driven by the shareholder scorecard that they have to deal with in this publicly their stock, right? And so from our standpoint, one of the things, our customer, your gardener, still doesn't really have much of a technology stack. So if there's a way we can use technology to get one step ahead of him as far as his expectations of what he needs for a job or what he bought last week, and historically he's bought these 5 things over every fall. Right now, it's seed season in the world of landscape supply. Certain portions of the country are selling ryegrass seed for Bermuda overseeds, and then in the East Coast, it's fescue overseed for the fescue that didn't make it through the summer for next spring. And there's just lots of things going on in our space that happens every year. And so we could help that customer get more efficient with our data, get our account managers to use promptive stuff that our customer needs but isn't really talked about. Those are things that I think data is going to be important with in the supply chain.
Again, I think from a different working and how we kind of our careers and how that changes how we look about the business, how we work. I mean, my dad, I have to say, I have to admire him for having a high risk tolerance for growth. And my dad would say that my grandpa ran the books. His brother kind of helped to run purchasing with my grandpa, and my dad went out and go grow the business. The risk appetite that my dad has is very, very high to invest in new locations, acquisitions, things that may not pay off for for 5 or 10 years, but we'll continue to drive the business forward. And so you've seen some massive growth since he took over as president in 2001. I mean, we probably went from now over 200 locations in 25 years. And so that's how he grew up in the business. Now I was on Wall Street doing M&A investment banking. So mergers and acquisitions, I'm very in tune with financial models, looking at all three: income statement, cash flow statement, balance sheet, some of that more financial acumen side. So I will try to take what my dad and that culture of growth and try to internalize that, but then also use my financial background and acumen to again, like my dad said, again, that it's a game of inches and distribution. And as our competitors, Home Depot, SiteOne, Pool Corps of the world, these guys are billions of dollar huge distribution companies that have scale. So how do we compete against that? We got to be better at the data, at the inches, at that financial profitability side to have better margins and better return on sales.
How do you think about the next stage of growth in an industry that is consolidating pretty significantly? You guys are large, family owned. How are you thinking about competing over the next couple of years with those players?
We have an internal moniker that we call fuller basket. So we're trying to capture more wallet share of our existing customers by expanding in categories outside of our traditional core irrigation. And irrigation is still over 50% of our company's revenue. And it's still a very dynamic and growing business. But again, there's so much opportunity for us to grow in other categories. Hardscapes, we call them ground cover, decorative rock, mulch, soils, pine straws. There's, even a ton of opportunity in fertilizer, chemicals, grass seed, kind of turf and ornamental type of business. So that's where a lot of the growth is going to come from. I mean, there's small categories out there all the time that are people put in their backyards. Holiday lights has become a thing. Outdoor lighting, outdoor sound, just like anything in your backyard. We don't plan on pursuing the nursery business and plants. That's a kind of a tricky, hairy business with growers and retail, but there's just a lot of opportunity outside irrigation. And so when you think about growth and new locations and some of the super centers we've been opening up and some of the different changes in how we think about real estate, no longer do we just need our 10,000 square foot buildings on an acre. And I'm in one in California right now that, small yard on about 8,000-9,000 square feet. And we did really well with that for almost 100 years and sold a lot of irrigation. And now it's like, okay, there's that much more market opportunity out there. I think SiteOne mentioned their total addressable market was $23 billion. And so that's a huge addressable market, but that includes categories outside irrigation. So
We're growing faster than the market, we believe, but we also see there's tons of potential. Think about our space. We have 0 locations in the Southeast Florida market, which is, you go Dade County, Palm Beach, down to Homestead. There's 12, 15 million people there. That's a well-landscaped space if you're down in Southeast Florida and go to the polo club, see your grandparents. But still, we're not in that space. So there's still lots of areas in the United States we could expand our business.
As you guys think about expanding the wallet, are you thinking about buying businesses in these different categories and integrating the products across all your branches? It strikes me that sometimes that would be easy, but a lot of times it wouldn't. Like if you need to start selling dirt and you don't sell dirt, you got to buy someone who knows how to move dirt. How are you thinking about buying a capability versus building it, depending on the sort of the scale of complexity around actually delivering it?
when we think about expanding through greenfield or acquiring. So traditionally the company, I would say of the 268 locations around there, I'd probably about 220 are greenfield locations.
Wow. Yep.
They're locations that we either purchased real estate or we found a location and hired a manager and figured it out. So now I think we're getting a lot better at the acquisition side of the business. Some of that is my background and understanding that as a family member and owner. Obviously also realizing the immediate accretiveness to the bottom line. If you acquire the right company that is positive EBITDA, it would require a little bit more capital up front, but you are acquiring a company that is immediately accretive, where some of these more greenfield locations do take more time to get customers in the door, build a customer base, and become profitable. So there's a blend to it all, and it depends on the opportunity and the company that you want to acquire in a certain market, or it depends on the piece of property that we come across in a market that is too good to be true. So there's a blend to it all in terms of how you want to think about growth. You're going to have opportunities where this is a kick-ass property in a great market that we have a good manager and you're like, we want to greenfield this location. And there's an opportunity for a company that you're going to spend a little bit more capital on, but you're going to get an immediately accretive lift in EBITDA. So I think it's a blend to either one. But traditionally, the company was built on greenfield locations.
One last question. We value curiosity here at Proton, so we always like to end by asking, what is one thing you are still curious about that you still are learning about in distribution?
I am fascinated, and I find it ironic. I mean, it's like the Merchant of Venice, right? Distributors are very flexible, nimble companies, and we've been around for thousands of years. And so I do find it fascinating to noodle on the fact that we're almost like the Bermuda grass or the cockroach. You just can't kill us. And then the other thing I find interesting is the fixed cost rate. If you look at your flywheel and you have flexible costs, which is your inventory and your people, but by and large, your costs are pretty fixed. And so if you can improve your margin or your collection or your inventory turns by a nanosecond, in a sense, it's fascinating to me how that all articulates to the bottom line.
It's the ultimate scale business.
Mm-hmm.
I think the couple of things I'm still very curious learning about is that data aspect. I think in my future role in the company and where we want to take the company going, I'm going to have to get really smart and really good at not only understanding the data, but the data visualization and the data warehouses and data lakes. And I just think in this day and age and where the world's going with AI, an executive has to really understand that data side of the business. Second is I'm still very young in my career. I still get humbled every day by different experiences. So I'm always curious what is around the corner for me in my career, because my dad's got 40 years experience and I've got 32, so 10 or 7 at Ewing. So the curiosity on really what it lies around the corner.
Awesome. Cool. I know we're at time. Jack, Doug, really, really appreciate you guys doing this. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Benj.
That's it for this episode of In the Mind of a Distributor. If you like this conversation, leave a review. It helps more folks in distribution find the show. If you're thinking about a CRM for your business, head to proton.ai to see how Proton can help you grow faster. Or if you want to connect with me, you can add me, Benj Cohen, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.